Chapter 17, Walkabout. The girl lay on her side, propped up with an elbow, cutting the 14th notch into a branch of yucca. The boy watched her. "How long you reckon we be here, Mary?" She counted the notches, first those on one side, then those on the other. 8 days in the desert, 6 in the valley. It seemed to both of them far longer. The pass, especially to the boy, was like another world. They lay beside a shallow lagoon, both of them naked, for on their 3rd day in the valley, the girl's dress had been torn beyond repair by the claws of a koala. In front of them, the reed-fringed water, motionless as glass, went looping away down valley. Behind them, the hills towered up, their summits wreathed in the cloud. On either side of them, the virgin forest, dark as a cathedral vault, sprawled almost to the water's edge. It was midday, and the valley of the waters under the earth lay motionless, asleep in the heat of the sun. For 6 days the children had wandered slowly up valley, exploring the curving lagoons, reedy marshlands, and the belts of semi-tropical forest. They had found a number of animals, fish, and reptiles, and a great multitude of birds. But of human beings there was never a sign. They had plenty to drink and plenty to eat, not always what they'd have chosen, for the water duck eluded every trap and snare, but at least something. Fruit or vegetable, reptile or fish, now they had come in specially beautiful reach of the valley, and the girl, much to her brother's disgust, was preparing to make a home. "Just a hut of reeds," she had said, "in case we want to come back." Peter had jabbed about at the idea of homemaking. "Gee, Mary," he said, "what we want a house for? If it rains, we can shelter in the forest." The girl had seemed so disappointed that he'd agreed to call a halt until the reed home was made. He wasn't, in one way, the least bit sorry to have an excuse to rest, to lie back in the lush, sun-hot grass and assimilate all that had happened in the last few days. They had seen such wonderful things, especially since they'd come to the valley. They had gone first to the lagoons, to the chain of the looping billabongs, fed by underground springs that lay like a string of sapphires split into the hollow of the valley. At first they had eyes for nothing but water. The clear blue longed for water, that in a few wonderful moments took the harshness out of their voices, the aching out of their throats, and the fear out of their hearts. Then they had noticed the birds. They were everywhere, in water and reeds, trees and sky. They were quite fearless. The children stared at them, wandered among them, watched and observed them with a wonderment that increased every hour of every day. They saw the wood ducks, the ducks that nest in trees, that carry their young to water by the scruff of their necks, as a cat carries her kittens. They saw the tailless swamp coots nibbling wild celery as they floated on self-made rafts. They saw snake birds with their long rubbery necks and pointed dagger bills, and the jacaras, the legendary Jesus birds, walking the water on their long, disproportionate toes that use fragile underwater lily leaves as stepping stones. They saw dabchicks and zebra ducks, marsh bitterns and pelicans, and late one evening they saw the dance of the brolgas. They were looking for a place to camp when Peter saw them, a cluster of 8 or 9 long-billed stock-legged birds, slim, silver-gray, and elegant, standing one-legged on the water's edge. As the children watched, they saw no sign, but suddenly, as if it at a clearly understood command, the brolgas came to life, moving gracefully into a circle. One bird took up position in the center. He was the leader of the ritual dance. Opening wide his wings, he began to stately pirouette and slow-motion quadrille. The others followed his lead. In stylized step, they pranced solemnly around the circle, their feet moving in perfect time, their wings rising and falling to the beat of unheard music. The dance went on for several minutes, more than 5, less than 10. Then, quite suddenly, it ended. As if at another command, the Brolgas broke circle, moved into a random cluster, and took up their original one-legged stance, gazing peacefully across the lagoon. The children passed within 6 feet of them, but they never turned their heads, and the birds of the forest were as strange and wonderful as the birds of the lagoons. The children never tired of watching them. They saw the mistletoe birds planting their crops, plastering tree trunks with the reeds of the parasites that would later provide them with food. They saw the hawks fanning their nests, bringing their eggs to the requisite temperature for hatching. The butcher birds stocking their larders, impaling live beetles, moths, and fledglings on the thorns of the iron bark, and the rifle birds gilding their basin-like nests with the cast-off skins of snakes. Every sunrise and every sunset, the birds' songs were near deafening, a diurnal cacophony of notes clear and limpid, bizarre and unmelodious. The soft cadence of pilot birds and wolf wail of soldiers, the croon of yellow bellies and the sandpapery scour of scissor grinders. While at night even stranger sounds echoed among the moon-white trees, the cow-like moo of the bittern, the yap of the barking owl, the cooee of the brain fever bird, and the rising above them all-nightmare scream of the channel bill, and maniacal shriek which terrified the water rodents into scurrying flight, making them betray their presence to the hovering bird. No less wonderful than the birds were the trees of the forest and their parasitic flowers and vines. The children have been a little afraid of the forest at first. It was so enormous, so dark and earthy smelling, with the tree trunks soaring skyward, the strange, evilly fashioned plants choking each other to death in a slime of decomposing vegetation. To start with, they had stayed on its edges among maiden blush of reddish brown and heartswood emerald green. Then, becoming bolder, they ventured in a little way in, to where sycamore vine and tulip wood and the cassius dug their quinine-producing roots deep into the fertile soil, and at last they dared the center, the heart of the primeval wonderland. Here they found a fantastic battleground of tree and creeper, parasite and vine, with the bodies of the vanquished decomposing in the humid soil. The trees soared skyward, slim and straight, seeking life-giving sun, but around them, choking them to death, coiled the daughters, predator vines, sucking the nutrient out of the roots, gripping the trees with tentacles like tightening tourniquets. The intertwined with the daughters were the chicas, headless, tailless, rootless vegetable snakes, growing on and on from either end, wrapping their vampire arms around anything they touched. But as the children were quick to see, even such a charnel house as the forest center was not devoid of beauty. The staghorns, their leaves rearing skyward like the antlers of mating deer, the rock lilies, their bells as white as virgin snow, and the orchids dangling like gossamer clouds out of the dark trees. They wandered through twisting tunnels arcaded with vegetation through which the sun had never penetrated. They smelt like rich, humid soil which had never felt the stir of drying wind. At first they were filled with awe and amazement, but eventually, after 3 or 4 days of exploration, they became as much at home in the forest as they had been in the desert. Together they watched the ant lion lying in the wait for his prey, lurking at the base of his self-dug trap, waiting for a victim to come plunging to his death. Together they watched the fisherman's spider, lowering his single thread baited with sweet-scented adhesive saliva. Then, when the bait was taken, hauling the thread in, hand over hand, they saw the stick-like praying mantis, the blue-skinned, red-caped cassowary, and on the 3rd day in the valley they saw the koala. They were on the fringe of the forest, collecting hips from the bush roses which grew in banks among the eucalyptus trees the day Mary lost her dress. "Look," she pointed out one of the trees. Halfway down its smooth-grained trunk was a moving ball of silver gray, a koala. Shifting from tree to tree, from one supply of gum leaves to the next, quietly the children crept on to the foot of the eucalyptus. Slowly, steadily, one leg at a time, the koala descended. It was Mother Koala, koala, and clinging to its back was a cub, a harmless, fist-sized teddy bear, fat, tuft-eared, button-eyed, and covered in smooth, sheening fur. When the bears were about 3 feet from the ground, Peter darted suddenly around the trunk. He grabbed the cub in a scruff at its neck, jerked it off the mother's back, and thrust it into Mary's arms. "Bet you never had a doll as nice as that," he grinned. The mother bear is far too slow-witted to defend her offspring, but she didn't run away. She hung on to the eucalyptus, blinking her eyes in surprise. Then she started to moan, a low, pathetic, sobbing moan. Mary's heart went out to her. "Peter, you beast! She wants her baby." She tried to hand the cub back, but its tiny claws were hooked right into her dress. The thin material, already rent and worn, gave way. There was a long, ripping tear. The dress slid up to her feet. The koala sobbed and moaned. A week ago, nothing more calamitous could have happened to the girl. But now, after her initial shock, she felt strangely embarrassed, more concerned with the cub than her nakedness. Kicking the remnants of her dress aside, she bent down to very gently returned the baby to its mother's back. Instantly, the sobbing ceased. The mother koala looked round, blinking her eyes, licked her cub, climbed down the last 3 feet of trunk, and waddled off to another eucalyptus. "Poor thing," Mary said. "You ought to know better. You ought to know better, Pete." When, after a fashion, the reed hut had been completed, the children moved on. Mary would have been happy to stay, but Peter was eager to explore the valley. That evening, they came to a bend in the lagoon, and rounding this, saw ahead of them the valley end, a sheer precipice of granite, and at its base a dark tunnel out of which an underground river flowed in a smoothing, pouring torrent. About a mile from the end of the valley, the river broadened out, forming a shallow, reed-fringed lake, 3/4 of a mile across. Here, children made camp beside the water's edge. They camped early, close to a patch of pink-tinted pipe clay, agreeing to explore the precipice the following morning. Well before sundown, they were eating rose hips and bobble nuts beside a blazing fire. Then Peter discovered the clay, discovered that when moistened, it could be used for drawing faces on the smooth lakeside rocks. He called Mary, and together, brother and sister experimented with pieces of moistened clay. They found that it drew like chalk on a blackboard, and soon the lakeside rocks were covered with drawings, crude but evocative drawings that would have been psychologists' delight. After a few experimental dabs and smudges, the children settled down to their respective works of art. Peter drew koalas, lizards, and Jesus birds, symbols of new life. But Mary drew girls' faces framed with glamorous hairstyles, dress designs that might have come out of Vogue, and a string of jewels like the Fifth Avenue advertisement, symbols of the life that was past. And after a while, she drew something else, something more revealing, a house, a simple outline. One door, one window, one chimney, one pathway lined with flowers, symbol of subconscious hopes and nightly dreams. The sun dipped under the rim of the hills. The children left their drawings. They stretched out side by side in front of the fire. Darkness on velvet wings came flooding into the valley. "Coo-ee, coo-ee," sang the brain fever bird over and over again. Down by the lake, a bitter mood among the reeds. A crescent moon lifted clear of the hills. The valley slept. Next morning, they smoothed out the ash of their fire. They were just starting off to explore the head of the valley when they saw smoke, a thin spiral of wood smoke, penciling the skyline above the opposite shore of the lake.